TV umpire to director, we have a review. Can you rock and roll it for me, please?
Welcome to episode 3 of Rock and Roll It. This is the podcast where cricket fulfills its true purpose, which is to be the subject of high thinking and passionate discussions about that switch from analysis to philosophy to just plain emotional outbursts. These are the kind of discussions that hopefully will find equal place in well carpeted living rooms filled with expensive cigar smoke and CD bars filled with the fumes of the cheapest possible rum. And speaking of things that you would find in CD bars, I've got with me Siddharth Monga and Karthik Krishnaswamy KK, and I'm Dustin Silgado. But I mean that as the biggest compliment because there are people in our comments who are already dubbing Siddharth and KK as the Karl Marx and Osho of cricket punditry and analysis. Any guesses as to who's who?
I think I am Osho.
Yeah, I think the beard, I've got more of a Marxist beard and a
Yeah.
vibe in general, I think.
Okay.
Hmm.
We leave that also to people's imagination. Anyway, in
Yeah.
this episode, we're going to be rock and rolling the fourth test between England and India at Old Trafford, which ended in an epic draw for India, batted 143 overs in the third innings to save the test. They were, of course, 2 for 1 at lunch on day number 4. Or, sorry, 1 for 2 if you're using the Indian and English terminology and not the Australian one. 1 run for 2 wickets, essentially. And then lost just 2 wickets in the next 142 overs. So let me start with a very open-ended question, which is what stood out most about that Indian rear guard? I'll start with you, Siddharth.
I think KL Rahul's batting, KL Rahul actually gave them the confidence, and he looked like the most equipped and the most calm, temperamentally and technically equipped for the task. And it was his solidity that kind of rubbed on to the others. As we saw, Gill had a little bit of luck. He was dropped twice. Jadeja was dropped first ball. But Rahul, absolutely no chance. He was so engrossed in that act of, trying to just play time, which is a very kind of painstaking process, because you cannot hit a 4 or a 6 and get closer to the target. This will happen at its own pace of just one ball at a time. There's no counter attack, no get out of the jail shot. It can be it can play a lot on your mind, your concentration, your mental strength is not mental strength is a kind of a little bit of a chauvinistic term. It's a your mental processes come into play. I think Rahul was so engrossed into it. I'm going to play, switch off, switch on. The kind of process that there was this one time when he defended one ball towards mid off, and he didn't even look up where the ball went. He was going back into his process of moving to square leg, getting ready for the next ball. While he saw, when he looked up, Shubman Gill was in his face because Archer had misfielded that ball at mid off and he had to run for that run. So all those kind of things. And eventually it took an almost unplayable ball to get him out. Otherwise, I couldn't see how England would be able to get him out otherwise.
That
Yeah.
word, yeah, I just
Sorry, go
want,
ahead, take it. Yeah.
that word sort of like engrossed, really, it kind of sums it up as far as how KL was batting. And, when you think of concentration, you think of like, oh my God, I'm really like trying really hard, struggling really hard to, you know, force myself to like focus and, like, I mean, many times in the past when, like Pujara has been at his absolute best, like he kind of reaches this seemingly from the outside, what appears to be this trance-like state, right? And Rahul seemed to like be batting in that. And it was the technique and that sort of, I don't know, like time slowing down kind of sense that you got, because he was keeping out 4 5 balls that, shot through like shin height, and he just brought his bat down and, next ball. And in as the match went on and, England grew a little tired and, there wasn't as much misbehavior off the pitch and stuff, then you tend to look back on the totality of that third innings as uh, you know really flat conditions. You know, India just battered and then they drew it. You can kind of come away with that after you watch the whole thing, but then you go back to that 1 for 2, 0 for 2, and 1 for 2 at lunch, I think, right? So you go back to that and the whole process that unfolded, and every step of the way, there were a lot of like moments of jeopardy there, and in the end, it all sort of melted away. And KL, like Munga said, he kind of set the tone for that. There was early on in Gill's innings, there was like a little bit of they were looking to get him LBW, and he was looking a little iffy. And then with Gill, I think it was almost a case of like, no, I'm not going to let them bowl like this. And the way he suddenly like started playing his drives, and of course, yeah, he got like a few full balls as well, which they were trying to bowl full, but he was meeting that with, okay, if you're going to do this, I'm going to like kind of play my game here. And then suddenly that two ends, two different kinds of ways of playing this situation emerged, and it was just fascinating to watch. And then yeah, it went on from there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
nothing summed up these two different ways of playing more than how they approached the uneven bounce. Rahul saw a slower pitch. He went deeper into the crease because it was if it was only staying low, he would have started coming forward and getting his stride in. But he knew there was also some balls that were kicking up, so he went deep into the crease to give himself time to adjust. Whereas Gill was more worried about the one that is staying low, so he was out in the out of the crease, standing out of the crease, getting a nice stride in. So even if he gets hit on the pad, he's outside the line, or if he is, or he's well forward for the to deny them the LBW. And both had their pros and cons. I mean, perhaps the ball that got Rahul, if he had been doing what Gill was doing, it would have perhaps got him out. But by the same, it would have perhaps not got him out. But by the same token, if he had been moving forward like Gill, he would have also had to face balls like Gill did, which hit him in the helmet or on the glove. So, and they could have just popped up anywhere. So both had their own styles, both had their pros and cons, both managed to do just enough for India to come away with a draw.
I felt like the key phases were one just after lunch on day four, right? When it's 1 for 2, the pressure's on. It seemed like at that time the uneven bounce wasn't as pronounced as on day five morning, but it was still there to an extent. That was the big challenge. And of course, the situation was a high pressure one. And then day five in the morning is when we saw, I think, the most number of balls kind of go high and low. It looked like Gill, even though he was well on the front foot, he was very clear in his mind that he wanted to just play with soft hands if there was extra bounce. And there were a couple that kind of hit his gloves and went down, right? And didn't carry to gully. But then when he was playing his aggressive shots, he was mostly kind of into the shot with firm wrists. And that was the key phase. Of course, the other one was then after lunch on day five, when you have the two left-handers in, and there's the challenge of Liam Dawson. Now, it looked like before lunch on day four, there was more happening for Dawson. But was that still, a big challenge that they handled well, or was it just that Dawson didn't get that much from the pitch, you think, after lunch on day five?
So, firstly, we must acknowledge that you need a little bit of luck to go your way in these kind of regards. And India had, I mean, if it was just normal conditions, all things being equal, against modern test attacks, batting out 5 sessions, you can't even think of it. What India had going their way, the pitch had slowed down. There was misbehavior, there was up and down, but it was happening so slowly that you could recover. And if even if you edged it, edges were not carrying most of the times. The second was that Stokes was not available on the whole first day. It was about 63 overs that Stokes was not available for. And then Stokes comes on and we see suddenly out of nowhere he's finding misbehavior out of the pitch. I don't know what he does. Is one great trier, and he leaves everything on the field there. So these two things said, India were very smart in the way they handled everything bowled at them. There was a period just before the new ball, And you know how cricket batters especially, and generally cricket followers, are very superstitious kind of people. They do not want to disrupt the natural flow of the game, the organic flow of the game, for the wrath of cricketing gods. uh, they generally farm the strike only when they're left with the tail or very close to the end. Here it was in the first session of the day where Gill and Washington just decided that they will stay at one. Gill initiated it, to his credit, that they will just stay at their ends, because Gill wanted to deny Dawson the rough outside Washington's off stump. And also, I think Archer was at the other end, and that up and down bounce was more troublesome for the right hander.
I think
And
it was
for the
Stokes. I
left
think it
hander,
was Stokes at that point, still
yeah.
bowling. Yeah.
Yeah. It was
Mm.
Stokes. So sorry. So then that turned, that became outside leg for Washington. So it worked for both, and it was very clever and very smart to do that without. I don't even think there was a discussion about it, because Washington was a little surprised when Gill turned down the first single. But after that, they were in cohesion. Even when there were twos available on the last ball, they would take only a single. They worked it really well.
Yeah. And also on the Stokes spell on day 5, the morning spell, it felt like I think of all the bowlers, I think Wokes and Stokes bowled the most from that end, from the Anderson end where the ball was kind of keeping low. And I'm not now. I may have to go back and like check, but I don't know if Archer and Cars bowled that much from that end. To me, it felt like Stokes got more out of that because he hits the pitch little harder. And maybe England missed a bit of a trick, especially on day 4, by not trying their two taller guys as much from the Anderson end. Or maybe they didn't hit those lengths as often as Wokes and Stokes did. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting actually. India also bowled Bumrah mainly from the Brian Statham end, if I'm not wrong, and it was actually Siraj bowling from the
Hmm.
Anderson end. Although I think it wasn't the pitch wasn't doing things that much from the Anderson end. Probably when India were bowling, Archer did get Gill out from the other end, from the Brian Statham end, but that was also maybe created slightly by this Chris Woakes ball that had done something crazy from the Anderson end, where it actually swung in the air away, bounced on about 8 meters, and then shot back, sharply at Gill. Nearly took his off stump.
And
Uh,
kept low as well.
yeah, kept low
Yeah.
almost. I mean, it would have hit off stump two-thirds of the way up probably. So yeah, that was the challenge for India, I guess, that up and down bounce. But overall, I mean, were you left after this test with the impression that this pitch, which funnily enough on day one we thought was quite a spicy pitch, everyone was saying 350 is a pretty good first inning score. In the end, was this just always a draw pitch?
I think day 2 was the day where it really looked like, okay, has Stokes got his toss called wrong? Because now India are going to bowl with a new ball when it's doing so much. It was seeming so much that at one point, I think after Jadeja got out, after Archer got Jadeja, there's a point where it felt like it was doing too much for England. And I think Washington and Shardul Thakur were batting at that point, and the ball was doing all sorts. And then India got all out, and then again things just changed. And maybe it's the pitch, maybe it's the Duke balls kind of behaving a little inconsistently as well, like one not doing as much as the other. And also, I don't think India bowled well at all in the first innings, especially with the new ball. So that kind of like led to the conditions from where England were able to score so many runs.
Yeah, I think it was India was starting to show the physicality of this test series into the fourth test. Uh, I think Bumrah and Siraj are two of the best proponents of controlled bowling and letting the wickets come to them instead of going for the wickets. But here we saw the lines were much straighter, which suggested that they did not kind of back themselves to be able to work through a 100 over innings and trying to keep it at 3 and over and let the wickets come to them. They were kind of searching for the wickets. The straighter line suggested that. Morne Mokal, the India bowling coach, suggested. I think it was like there was a time when on the wagon wheel, India had conceded 100 runs on each side. So, and that's a very rare wagon wheel. So, yeah, that, and also India did not have the depth in the bowling attack. Anshul Kamboj, who came highly recommended by uh, many people, from starting from his state to his IPL team to the national selectors. And I just, it didn't look like he was fully fit. I don't know where this failure had happened. He was he hardly went above 128 kilometers an hour. These pitches will not give you any reaction at that pace. He's clearly not represented the best of himself. Hopefully, he gets another chance someday. But yeah, so that period where, and also the fourth fast bowler Shardul Thakur, it is becoming clear that this is not the place for these kind of statements, but this just did not seem like the captain wanted Thakur in the team. It felt like captain wanted perhaps somebody like Kuldeep Yadav, because he did not bowl Thakur at all, or practically he did not bowl Thakur at all, which kept becoming more and more apparent. So India did not have that depth in the attack to be able to bowl control and Bumrah. And for some reason, I think Stuart Broad was the one who articulated it well, saying that the outfield is heavy, which so you do not get your momentum in your run up to be able to run that fast. And then B, the footholds were a little loose, so you do not get enough feedback into your pivot or hip drive, because your foot is not fully, it's not stable
Planted, like.
on the ground, which is why Broad said the pace was down for both Archer and Bumrah, but also miles in legs. So all this put together, it became very, very good batting conditions, and England were really good to make use of them.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
also, I think Nasir Hussain kept repeating that the scores at Old Trafford this season have been very high in the county championship. There haven't been as many finishes as at other grounds. And on day 4 and 5, also, what seemed to be happening was the pitch was doing something in the first session. So I think on day 4, 5 wickets fell in the first session. On day 5, of course, both the wickets fell in the second session. And then the pitch seemed to flatten out. Is that just because of maybe the effect of the roller in the morning giving the pitch something extra, or was it just that the bowlers are getting tired beyond the morning session, do you think?
It could be a bit of both, maybe like overnight under the covers, little bit of moisture, kind of sweating happening. Uh, on the Bumrah thing, you could kind of tell on day 4. I think he bowled his best on day 4 when England were already like, their score was way out of control and stuff. But maybe it was a case of, okay, him getting used to the conditions, underfoot conditions at Old Trafford or whatever. And you could see he was hitting the pitch a bit harder. He was kind of zipping through a bit more. But yeah, these are like the kind of challenges that you get away from home. And yeah, and on the, 2 wickets falling for India, uh, second session of day 4, that also had to do with how much fielding they had done. And, you come out, and of course, Vokes bowled a really, really accurate. I mean, that ball to Jaiswal was a really good one, firstly. Could have gotten anyone, any left-hander. Maybe, you can quibble. Was he looking to play 2 leg side? Should he have been playing it down the ground? But, you know, it's a hard ball to face. But the Sai Sudarshan one, again, like, you can maybe like, draw a line from how much time they spent on the field to that kind of indecision of like, or that late decision to leave the ball, right? Where you might maybe think in the first innings, he would have just immediately pulled his bat up and like, let it go harmlessly. So all that also comes into play. And yeah, and for once, like, in this series, it was England dropping 3 catches, 3 pretty like at pretty significant moments as well. So that also like came into it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
finally the luck kind of started to even out. we've all been beating on and on about how India have not been lucky, and some people think we are being India apologists, but that is not the case. India, I think India did get an even break in this test, and are able to capitalize on it and keep the series alive.
Speaking of being India apologists, we have to now also talk about something that happened at the end of the test, some shenanigans that happened right at the very end. Siddharth's already written a piece about it that's up on Cricinfo, where he's called the actions of England's players, in particular Ben Stokes, moral posturing. Others have called it childish, puerile. I'll actually go a step further, and I think it was almost borderline bullying, to be honest. I mean, when two players are saying, we're on 80 and 90, we want to play on and get hundreds. I don't understand how the opposition can say, no, we think you shouldn't do this, so therefore you should not do this. And start to then try to diminish what they're trying to do by saying, well, you will get the 100 against, our part timers. I mean, hello, when Brian Lara got 400, he faced 30 overs of Prescothick and won. That's what happens in Test cricket. You go through the difficult part. And Jadeja and Washington had done that. And then, of course, if you have to get the last 10 runs of a part timer, doesn't diminish what you've done before that. And then for Stokes to go on about it after the game and again say that, well, the satisfaction would not have been any less had they scored 80 and 90. I mean, how does he know what satisfies other people? I mean, does he know these people? Does he know their families? Does he know what a first test 100 might mean for Washington Sundar's father, his family, people in his orbit for whom, 100 not out means a lot more maybe than an 80 not out. I don't understand, how these guys can think. And it's not the first time England are doing this, where they are trying to enforce what they think or what they would have done in a situation and say, no, this is what everybody should do. Am I alone in thinking this, KK? I know Siddharth kind of agrees with me because I've read his piece, but am I alone or am I making some sense?
I mean, so like what I really got like annoyed by was in the end, there were a lot of discussions where I mean, there's already a narrative that India are sort of uniquely obsessed with milestones. That, other teams don't care about it as much as India do, which is rubbish. Like, I mean, let me put two examples. One is Dravid declaring when Tendulkar was on 194 and the furor that caused. But there's an English example of a very similar thing happening when Atherton declared when Graham Hick was on, I don't know, 96 or something like that. And to this day, they still talk about it when the opportunity comes up, right? Because these things mean something, right? You're a cricketer and this is what you're measured by. Like 3 years down the line, you're, uh, whether you scored that 100 when, the opposition had already given up and they were bowling Harry Brook, or you got to that 100 at an earlier point. It's still 100, and that's going to add to your tally. And then you're going to look at, okay, Ravindra Jadeja versus Ben Stokes and how many hundreds they have. You're not going to be like, oh, this particular 100, came in these circumstances. Therefore, no, you don't. And they had absolutely earned the right to continue batting. And it's in the rules that, both teams have to agree, you know, for that early finish to happen. They didn't agree, so you play on. And if you want to bowl your better bowlers, bowl them. If you don't want to, don't bowl them. Right? And on Washington Sundar's father, whom you brought up, we know like how he reacted to, how this poor guy got stranded on 85 and 96 in what was only his second test series in 2021. And that was March 2021. He, in Ahmedabad, I think there's a late collapse, right? He and Rishabh Pant have a big partnership, and then India lose. No, him and Akshar Patel also have a pretty big partnership, and then India lose their last 3-4 wickets in a flurry, and that's it. He's stranded on 96.
It was Siraj, by
And
the
that
way, I
is
think, the last wicket.
the last wicket was Siraj, and the that's his last test innings. This is March 2021. That's his last test innings until October 2024. 3.5 years he's had to wait to just play test cricket again after making 96. He's been playing in the era of Ashwin, Jadeja, Akshar Patel, Kuldeep Yadav, and he's had to wait a long, long time just to be able to play again. And then he gets this opportunity, and then he's like, batted close to 200 balls at this point to get his team to safety. And then this sort of it's a bit of an arbitrary cutoff point, right? Final drinks break or whatever. It arrives. Now England can think, okay, this is it. Match is done. We're walking off. You walk off too. But hello, they can't decide that unilaterally. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, and
Uh,
if England had said, look, we think we can get the 5 wickets, in 1 hour, India can't tell them, no, no, that's not possible. So,
Yeah,
you shouldn't do it. Why are you doing this? And the other thing, I have a
exactly.
couple of other things to say, like Harry Brook kind of mock bowling badly. It's like, if I went for a bodybuilding contest and I did mock poses and said, oh, I'm only losing because, I'm not taking it seriously. That's one thing. And the other thing is I mean, first of all, whether or not England care about records is honestly not even relevant to the discussion. But just checking, is the Lord's Honours Board, is that for 80 not outs in draws also, or is it only for 100? Huh? Do you get 89 not out if Ben Stokes says, yes, yes, this is worth 100, do you get it there or do you not?
yeah, I see if Shubman Gill is not quite the he's not quite the confrontational captain yet, but if it was Kohli or Gavaskar, I'm pretty sure they would have batted the whole 15 overs. They would not have stopped at 100. They would have said, okay, you don't like it. We will make you do something that you hate the most. Uh, uh, I don't know if there was something, if England were aware of what they were doing. They were aware of the situation. I just wonder if they were aware of the situation, if they knew India were going to play for that hundreds and they wanted to make a show out of it by offering those handshakes and reacting exaggeratedly. I mean, as you said, it's not about what you do, it's about respecting what others do. It's just about, you played for 36 hours. What's an extra 15, 20 minutes? It was so unnecessary to make such a show out of it. And having said that, I should also point out that Ben Stokes has been uh, a complete champion in this series. He has given out everything on the field. He's not cared about bowling workload management. He's not cared about injuries. And at Lords, they were quick to see the crestfallen Siraj and cut short their celebrations and go on and check on him. And console him. So they have otherwise been absolutely great ambassadors for cricket, but this was something where it's one of those things. Cricketers tend to have like a kind of a opaque inbuilt kind of moral code of conduct where some things are okay for them and some things which nobody other understands are completely inflammatory for them and they lose their minds. This was one of those things. It's there are many examples of it. Like Gill also lost his mind when he said even we would have tried to delay, but there's a manner to doing it. There's no manner to doing it. You do whatever you get away with. The only problem with for me here is that if England were doing it for a competitive advantage, everything would be fine. Here it was just virtue signaling.
Yeah. And I mean, it's not the first series where England are taking this posture of lecturing the rest of the world. It did happen in the Ashes. I think they also should be a little bit aware of their image that ultimately, and I don't want to go like full Shashi Tharoor, Rajdeep Sardesai here, but ultimately, cricket is a colonial sport. There's a history to it. And when there's a particular country that is lecturing other countries on how this sport should be played, or particular countries, I should say, it feels a little worse than if other countries were doing it. Maybe India in that same place now with the power they have in cricket. So I think that England need to be a little bit aware of their image also when it comes to these kind of lectures about, oh well, they should have been satisfied with the 80. I mean, that's not really for them to take that call.
As
Anyway,
we
yeah, sorry.
as we speak, Nasher, our friend, our colleague Andrew Nasher McGlashan has sent me a collage of headlines in Australia because now Australia are putting the boot in. I just read out the four headlines. One is spare us the whinging England. The only thing embarrassing about Old Trafford was your tantrum. This is by our friend Daniel Brittig. The other headline is England's appalling display mars absolute test classic. Then moral hypocrites, England decide tons are anti-cricket. And then spirit dot 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 of what? Question mark. How pompous England exposed baseball's greatest double standard. So the Ashes point scoring has also begun.
Okay,
And
anyway, uh,
India and Australia have suddenly become friends.
yeah. Anyway, I want to get into some of the more meaty topics now, the cricket topics. And we do have to talk about, I know you guys have touched upon it a bit already, but India's selections for this test. So that's already touched upon the Cambodia selection. I think what kind of stood out about that selection was that you had a fast bowler in your team in Prasidh Krishna, right, KK, who,
Yeah.
I mean, yes, he didn't have two outstanding tests, but he showed some potential, certainly at Headingley, at least in the second innings. And to choose somebody who has literally got off the plane, how many training sessions did he even have, Siddharth? One or two? One net he's had. Yes,
And
he's been.
it is on, just wanted to add it, it's on a damp pitch where you can, because it's been raining, you can be more effective, you can look more effective. And in one net session, I doubt you bowl more than 5 overs.
Yeah, right. And to be fair, Kamboj was part of the India A squad that toured England. He got 5 wickets there. He was the leading wicket taker in Duleep Trophy. So no one's questioning why he then became part of the squad. But KK, what did you think of them picking him ahead of Prasidh Krishna, a bowler who at least has been part of the series, training with the team throughout? You've had a look at him in two tests where he's not been appalling. I mean, at least he can bang the ball into the wicket if nothing else. That's a huge call to make. And when it goes so badly wrong, when it's such a big call, it just doesn't sit well, does it?
Yeah, it doesn't. And I think it would be, you'd be like, okay, it happens if it's a one-off thing. I just feel like there's been a pattern since Australia of, you know, yes, this
Absolutely.
can this can happen during a transition period, right? When you have a bunch of young guys and you're not quite sure who your best, and sometimes that can lead to a little bit of chopping and changing, and you're kind of frantically trying to figure out, okay, who's the next cab on the rank or whatever, right? But it's been happening since Australia that, okay, first Harshit Rana plays, right, and he bowls in conditions that really suit his style of bowling in Perth. He does really well, and then they get to Adelaide, and it's almost like they forced to persist with him. So you kind of understand, why they did persist with him, but his limitations were kind of exposed then. But they've not completely. It's like he's not played since then. Then he was brought in as a kind of reserve early on this tour, brought in as cover when there was an injury or an injury scare. But then he's not in the squad anymore, right? And and then Akashdeep, towards the end of that Australia tour, it's clear that he's got the kind of tools. He's testing the batters. Even the opposition are saying it that he's bowled really well, but unluckily and gone past the edge a lot of time. First two tests here doesn't play, which again, like, you can kind of understand it, but
The
there's
first
also a
test, he
sense of
played
like,
the second in
yeah,
place of
correct,
Bumrah.
correct.
Yeah.
First test he
But
doesn't
he was
play.
dropped for the Sydney test, right? When Prasidh came in place of him in Sydney.
No.
Oh,
Oh
wasn't
no,
it
yeah,
Bumrah,
yeah.
Siraj, and Prasidh?
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're right. You're right. He was dropped there, right? And then, first test he doesn't play here. And second test he plays because Bumrah doesn't play. But it's clear that by then that, he's one of your top three, right? And yeah, the next test match he's not at full fitness, doesn't bowl that well. That happens. But then Prasidh, you play him in the first two tests. And again, it's apparent that he's got certain things going for him, even though the figures may not show it, even though he's raw and that rawness also comes through. But in that second innings at Edgbaston, when he bowls like length, he's getting, he's troubling the batters, doesn't get wickets then. And he's not doing that short ball attack where he's going for runs or getting a wicket or whatever. It's not that high risk, high reward strategy. When he's bowling length, something is there, right? So you can see why he's left out, but you can't. I don't understand why he's not the guy brought back in when there's an opening, because
He
there's enough. He's shown enough to tell you that, okay, he's not perfect, but this is a guy you can invest in and keep playing when you have that opportunity where you have to play someone outside of your top three,
I mean, he's gone from
and they
third
don't play
choice
him.
to sixth, basically. He was third choice when they started the series. Now you've lost Akashdeep and Arshdeep, but you're bringing in another guy. And so he's
Another guy, yeah.
basically number 6, number 3 to number 6 is the slip after 2 tests for Prasidh.
Yes, and it's not happened because he's looked terrible. It's happened in a kind of inexplicable way. That's the issue here. And again, Shardul Thakur, it was very clear that as as erratic as he was, it was also very clear that Gill was giving him the ball only after all other options had been exhausted, and he pretty much had to go to Thakur, which was not happening when they brought in Nitish Kumar Reddy, because they gave him like an almost new ball, right? Uh, at Edgbaston, and he like picked up wickets. But also, like, you could see that Gill had that kind of faith in him to go to him a little earlier, go to him a little more often. Now, either something has changed with Thakur's bowling between then and this test match at Old Trafford, or some conversations have happened between Gill and the coach and Thakur, and some sort of understanding has been reached. But that didn't seem to be the case either, because again,
Bowled very
Thakur
few.
bowled very few overs. Of course, he didn't do himself any favors. He didn't like show his captain that he deserved, more overs. So, but again, it felt like he was only bowling when Gill had no other option. Plus, when you had two spinners and three other fast bowlers, right? So then the question does arise of why? Why is this insistence on there's two things. Why have you by now not identified, okay, these are our guys, we'll have faith in them, they will have bad days, but these are the people we've invested in. Why has that not happened? And the second thing is, why are you playing a seam bowling all-rounder for the sake of it? Like, I've almost come round to, okay, if it's Nitish Kumar Reddy and you see so much potential in him and he's shown glimpses of it, enough glimpses of it to say, okay, you may have a point, stick with him. But why play one for the sake of it when your captain is,
Not going to bowl him.
from the outside looking like he doesn't have faith in him? And all of this when you have a guy whose point of difference is that when nothing else is happening, he can get you wickets. Kuldeep Yadav is that bowler. Like, maybe you can say, oh, you're just saying that, but whenever he's gotten a chance, and he's not had that much he's played 13 test matches, but in those 13 test matches, before he became the bowler he had a 5-4 in Sydney. And then after he became the bowler, like this 19 wickets against England, it wasn't just that, these were not raging turners, and some of his best performances were like on day one in Dharamshala when the other two spinners weren't really getting much out of the pitch. He gets a 5-4 and runs through England. These are the kind of performances he's given you. So there's enough to suggest that on an Old Trafford pitch like this, he could get you like 2-3 wickets in a spell somewhere, and yeah. So when all of these things come together, it just looks like a very muddled bowling plan that's in place.
There's another trend that I wanted to point out. I think against New Zealand, Kuldeep Yadav is part of the squad, but India lose one test and suddenly Washington Sundar is called from outside the squad and straight into the 11.
But was that because Kuldeep already had the hernia? Because
He
I'm
did.
still not
So
clear
they
about
wanted
that.
to kind of
Huh.
manage his workload before his surgery. He was
He
still
was
in the
available
squad. It was a
for
weird thing. Yeah.
he was available for all three tests. I've confirmed that. Then
Okay, that
Yeah,
is
he
a
was
very weird
he was still
one,
in the
if
squad.
that's the
They
case.
didn't drop him from the squad. They didn't rest him for that. He was still in the squad. He was still bowling in the nets.
Then Shubman Gill gets injured in Australia. Abhimanyu Ishwaran does not play. Devdutt Padikkal comes from outside and plays in his place. Champions Trophy, uh, Varun Chakravarti is not in the original squad, but he is called in from outside the squad and straight into every 11. Here, Anshul Kamboj is not in the squad. Prasidh Krishna is, but he's called straight off and just walks off the flight into the 11.
And these
There
are
is,
18 player squads, by the way. It's not like a 14, 15 player squad.
yeah.
18 players, but yet you are going to a 19th player playing ahead of somebody who's in the 18.
Yeah, so there is something believing in some kind of a miracle or some magic combination that will come from magic ingredient that will come from outside, and also it's scandalous that because when you pointed out Harshit Rana coming in as cover earlier in the series, that was because Anshul Kamboj went back home from India with a shin injury. Now there should be a protocol if somebody has got injured and gone back from a tour. There should be a protocol where the medical team at NCA in India clears him, and then when he reaches the team management, he should be put through his fitness test again. I seriously doubt Anshul Kamboj, the way he was running and the way he was chasing the ball, I seriously doubt he cleared a yo-yo test.
Is the yo-yo test still part of the official?
Or whatever. I mean,
Yeah.
whatever your fitness standards are, you could be doing your 2 kilometers in 8 minutes or whatever. But he was not test match fit. Poor guy, he's a very good bowler otherwise.
Yeah, but
He
this
might
is
not
where
be
it's the team.
40
This is where it's the
kilometers.
team management's call, right? Because I know what you're saying that he comes highly recommended, but ultimately you have to think about, is he ready for this test straight off the flight, one training
Obviously
session?
not.
Anshul Kamboj, I mean, we don't want to slam him after one test. He might go on to have a decent test career for all we know. But the
If he
fact is that
doesn't, we do not want
but
to
the fact is
see.
for this test, it was not. I mean, it was just it was a kind of pick where if you felt someone has outstanding talent, like somebody who's done something outrageous in white ball cricket, like a Bumrah when India just threw him in into test, you can kind of understand it. But for a bowler who, even when he is say fully fit, is a steady 132, 133 kph bowler, to just throw him into a test almost like he's this X factor that's going to win you the test ahead of guys in the squad, it seems strange. Anyway, I have to also try and play the devil's advocate here, try to rationalize some of these selections. Is it possible that with Shardul, the idea here was they just felt, because see, one thing India have been firm on is that they don't want to go into test with just three seamers. This is something since the 2021 WTC final, India feels that we don't want to have just three seamers because they're thinking, what if on day one at Old Trafford it's overcast, which it was. It's forecast to be overcast throughout the test. What if the ball starts hooping around and seaming around? We don't want to then look silly bowling spin in the 15th, 16th over without the fourth seamer. And then they think, okay, we need the fourth seamer, but we can't play Prasidh as fourth seamer because then Kamboj is batting at 8 and we have three mugs. So we have to play Shardul. Is that the logic that they're going in with? And, is that the only reason why they would play him? Because they just feel that we may just need that fourth seamer.
I think
Yeah,
there's
I mean,
also sorry,
go
this
ahead.
is also unfortunate situation of having to manage Bumrah's workload, and I think they're also conscious of having a fourth fast bowler so that Bumrah is not overbowled. But what happened in the end was that Bumrah was overbowled because the fourth seamer was not used. That is the disconnect. I see what you're saying there, but is the question to be asked is Thakur in a wicket taking form? Because you need to have a kind of an understanding or a theory, so to speak, of how you will get 20 wickets to win a test match. This team does not seem to be able to articulate that theory. Their theory is just we will contain and maybe the wickets will come. It's not, you have to play four strike bowlers, and Thakur right now is not, in the way he's bowling and also in the way Gill is uh, appraising his bowling, he is not that strike bowler, and nor are Washington and Jadeja in these conditions. So you need at least you should have had either Prasidh Krishna or Kuldeep Yadav. And if you believed that this was going to be a very seam friendly pitch, you should have had Prasidh Krishna. If you believed that it was going to be a flat one, you should have had Kuldeep Yadav.
Yeah, I mean, Shardul's bowled 11 overs in the test. I think Joe Root bowled about 20 plus. And only
That
two
is
or three
because
of
he
those
was
was in the
so.
last 15 minutes. I'm just,
Some of them were not in the spirit of the game.
I know, but only two or three of them. But I'm just throwing that in there on Shardul.
Yeah.
Anyway, I
On
mean,
the
we've talked.
just
Sorry,
if I
yeah.
can, sorry, on the Shardul point, it's you can ask now, okay, hey, you're talking about Shastri and Kohli were like always chasing 20 wickets, but they were also playing Thakur at 8. But the difference then is that Shardul Thakur was taking wickets, and Shardul Thakur, and even though there were times when he was bowling after the other three or like 40 overs into the game, he was still taking wickets,
Yeah.
and so
Yeah.
therefore that question of, okay, how are they going to take 20 wickets was being answered because they were taking 20 wickets. And also At that time, they had more experience in running through the rest of the seam attack. That, on a day when on a day, bad day for Shardul Thakur, they could be like, okay, he bowls fewer overs, but the other three plus Jadeja can kind of manage that load between them, right? Now, when you don't have that experience, where Siraj has gone from being the third most experienced to the second most experienced, and then you're not sure of what you're going to get from your third seamer. It's a gamble too far when Shardul is not looking like he's going to get you wickets either, to throw him in and be like, okay, we're going to manage with two guys we can rely on, plus a new guy who's just come off the plane, and Shardul Thakur. And, two spinners who I think they've overperformed here, especially Washington Sundar. I, you know, I'll say that he's consistently like shown ever since his comeback in Pune that his bowling has gone up more than one level. It's gone up 2-3 levels where he's now completely different from what he was when he first came in 2021. He's, the amount of drift he's getting, the kind of areas he's bowling, the kind of questions he's asking, he's really gone up a notch. And, fair play to kind of India for seeing that and kind of bringing him in and showing that. But for all that, on these pitches, to be averaging 28 with the ball like he is, it's kind of not what you expect. He's overperformed, the kind of metric you expect from a really good finger spinner on English pitches. So it's him and Jadeja doing what they've done has kind of made a bad selection strategy look slightly better.
I just have one thing to add. When Thakur under Shastri and Kohli, they were playing on extreme seam pitches.
No, and he played as a fourth seamer very clearly when he played.
So
for example, in 2021 in England, he played because Ishant was injured. I've done like a full deep dive into Shardul's career. We can do a separate rock and roll it podcast on his career because he's actually, I think, an unfortunate case like some other Indian seamers who've been cast into this role of all-rounder when he was never that. Shardul Thakur debuted in 2018 as one of two Indian seamers in an attack where he unfortunately bowled just 10 balls. Then he was picked because Ishant Sharma, the Gabba test because everyone was injured. Then he was picked because Ishant was injured. For the Oval test, he was picked because both Ishant and Shami were injured. And then after those 50s he got at the Oval, this thought came of, oh, this guy could bat. Otherwise, that was never why Shardul Thakur was picked in India's squads. He was a fourth bowler. His first class average is actually less than Kuldeep Yadav's, which is also something I recently discovered. Maybe not a full representation of their batting, but my point is it's not like this guy was an all-rounder. It's just that now he's cast into that role. But
no,
anyway,
I was saying that he was more effective only because India were given extreme seamers, extreme seaming pitches, which is why Thakur became much more of a bowler. It's like, Liam Dawson on a square turner in India might become a handy bowler come batter for them. It was just that. It was not that Thakur had the consistent pace or the consistency with the areas to be considered as a mainline, as a frontline seamer at that time. Yeah. He became much more effective, which is what, to just correct a little bit of revisionism that, Kohli and Shastri were never worried about batting. They also were worried about batting. They weighed his batting against Ashwin's batting and they thought it's not that big a drop off. But the upside is on these pitches, Thakur can be much more effective than Ashwin.
I think we found 15 different ways to say that we find the selection in this series very confusing. But let's move on from just the team management and picking the 11 to also the in-game captaincy. Because in this test, there were some big calls made by Gill as well on the field. One, giving Kamboj the new ball, having picked him. And then, of course, the big one, not bowling Washington Sundar till the 69th over, after he had taken that 4-wicket haul at Lord's. Make sense of that. What do you think, particularly with Washington? What do you guys feel was the reason Gill waited so long to bring him into the attack?
I think it was just that he saw when India were batting, especially on the second morning, they saw the ball was doing a lot for fast bowlers. So it perhaps took him a while to realize that the pitch had gone to sleep, and it was not that the bowlers were bowling extremely poorly, and that if they got their act together, they might get something out of the pitch. I don't think it was that much of a big deal. Uh, it really did not make that much of a difference. Also,
I mean, he
I
got
think
two wickets, which I know
yeah,
is I mean, it's a
it,
results-based analysis, but yeah.
it ends up looking worse because Washington just comes on and takes two wickets. And we must give Gill credit for his on-field captaincy at Lords, how he used Nitish Kumar Reddy as early as he did, and he kind of knew that what he was doing with Reddy, because Crawley kind of tends to play a loose shot against somebody who's not express space, and he had the fields for that. He used him really well. So I mean, I am not judging Gill's captaincy, and it is sometimes this on-field captaincy can be overstated. The impact of on-field captaincy can be overstated. So I'm okay with that aspect of
I'd
Gill's
all
play.
I'd also like kind of add that I think Washington coming on late is also a factor of like he's still growing into like the cricketer he's going to be, right? Where is he a bowler first? Is he a bat? He's got the kind of raw material in both departments to be like a number five who occasionally bowls if India want to look at him that way, or a number eight who bowls more if India want to look at him that he's like a scarily talented player who's really coming into his own, especially with the ball, which he didn't have all of the tools that he now has. 4 5 years ago when he first came in, he always had the batting talent. So I think it's also a case of India kind of still understanding, okay, we have this guy. Maybe they slightly underestimate his bowling too, like I have done many times, I feel. And then he comes in and he gets Pope and Brook out, right, with that lovely drift that he's getting. These aren't wickets you can kind of plan for, uh, because you're thinking, okay, there's really not much happening off the pitch, and he almost turns that into an advantage. Uh, so yeah, I mean, maybe he could have brought him on for 2 3 over for a short spell earlier. And usually that's what tends to happen in these matches where there's a break, there's a lunch break or a tea break, and you bring on your spinner for 1 or 2 overs. And then it looks fine. It looks like, okay, he's already bowled a little bit. And then he comes on for his second spell, right? Here, India already have another spinner who's done done that and done a bit of bowling. So when you have six bowlers, it's inevitable that someone's going to like come on as late as Washington did.
Yeah, I think also the overs got split between days 2 and 3. So, you
Hmm.
started day 3 with pace again. And to be fair, that on day 3, Bumrah and Siraj, that was probably the best pace for India, where 10 overs, they kept the run rate to below 3. There was a little bit happening. I think there was at least one false shot per over, if I
Yeah.
checked. There were a few balls that were keeping low, beating the edge. So that, I think, encouraged Gill to then give the seamers a little bit more of a bowl on that day. But again, coming back to that Bumrah Siraj spell, if you go back to again day 2, and maybe this is, it's all, it might not have mattered in the end. But opening with Bumrah and Kamboj, I know Bumrah for once didn't have a good spell himself. But the fact is that when Bumrah and Siraj bowled in tandem on day 3, they did have some control. Whereas when Bumrah opened the bowling with Kamboj, India seemed to almost immediately lose control. The second over went for 12 runs. Again, is that a call that Gill is making on the field, or is that already decided before that we are going to open with this guy?
No, no, this was decided. This was a decision made. This was like going to a restaurant and already pre-deciding what we'll order based on the feedback on Google Maps. They had got this feedback that Anshul Kamboj is a very good seam bowler. He gets a lot of seam movement, and probably he did in the nets. To be fair to them, but the nets are, because there was only one net session and it was a little damp, that pitch. It probably did not give them the right indication of where Kamboj was at the given moment. I don't think Kamboj lacks in skills. It's more that I think, let's not say for fitness, maybe conditioning, because he has just landed, and probably didn't get enough time to acclimatize to and to get his body in the perfect rhythm to deliver the pace that was required. And it was, I think he bowled good areas. It was just the lack of pace that did him in. And they corrected it as soon as they realized, hey, this is not working. They correct the day three. They started with the two bowlers likeliest to get a wicket, and they were very close. On another day, they could have got 2 or 3 wickets in that 1 hour.
And I'll add one more thing to this, which is that all of this was kind of compounded by the conditions at Old Trafford, which I think it's not a very forgiving pitch or ground to err on. You err slightly, especially against this England batting lineup. You err slightly, and like they were just going for boundaries everywhere. And before you knew it, like Duckett and Crawley had were close to like a 50-run opening stand. And that I think Old Trafford is one of those grounds where if you are a little bit, because even the Ashes test here, look at Australia's economy rates, and these are really experienced bowlers. Uh, One of the best attacks in the world. They went for 550. I mean, they England scored 550 odd against them, and uh, some of them were going at 5 and over as well. So I
Anyway, even Australia's batters had to struggle to just score 300 like India's did. And it looked at that time that the 300 or whatever they scored was a good score,
mm,
like India's did.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Gill said after the game that he felt India in the first innings, they had batters set and they didn't continue. But looking back, it's hard to pick too many shots where you felt like, oh, this is a batter giving his wicket away. I mean, it felt like most of the wickets were earned. Sai Sudarshan also, I mean, he's a guy in his second test now, playing a pull shot like that. I think it's very harsh to say, he gave it away. So, yeah, I don't know what really to make of that from Gill saying that maybe in the first innings we could have done more. Maybe it's just retrospective from him seeing what India did in the second innings, thinking, oh, how did we only get 350 in the first? But anyway, let's look ahead now because ahead meaning literally 2 days ahead because that's when the
Yeah,
next
yeah,
test is. And these
yeah.
two teams now, it's been our editor wanted me to mention what a great series it's been, so I shall. He asked me to find out when was the last time.
We don't actually think this, huh?
No, of
Only
course
Sambit
it's
Bal
been.
thinks this.
No. But his question to me, I have not been able to answer so far, which is when was the last time we had 4 tests of a series where every test has gone into the fifth day and the last session of the fifth day. I had to spoil it for him by telling him that Edgbaston finished in the second session, right, of
But
day
the tea
5.
session was extended.
Sambit was very disappointed, but he still said, when was the last time the 3 tests finished on the last session and one in the second? But it has been a grueling series. Both teams are going in like heavyweight boxers, teetering into the last round. I mean, Stokes has got multiple injuries. Archer, I don't know if he's going to play. Vokes looks on his last leg, so does Cast. So England have their own issues. But with India, they're without Pant, obviously. Are they without Bumrah? That's the question. I mean, he certainly looked knackered, as you guys have pointed out. But there's also a bunch of stats floating around about how Bumrah has, only averaged 40 against England's top order. He's only taken 2 wickets with his new ball spells. Or does all that entice Bumrah to say, okay, let me have one last go? And also, what do India now do with these number 8 and 9 positions? Who do they pick? What do you guys think India will be thinking ahead of this next test?
So India right now are in a better position than England, physically speaking, because both Arshdeep and Akashdeep are now fit. And then I think the process that will be is Bumrah will have to offer his services for this test match. And then the team management will, if Bumrah wants to play, I don't think the team management is going to go and, ask him to change his mind. Or body. It's not just mind. Let's make it clear. It's a serious, real body issue where if he overbowls, he's at the risk of cutting short his career. So if Bumrah offers his services, the medical staff should make a considered decision, keeping both this series and his Bumrah's well-being in mind, and then decide whether Bumrah should continue or not. Siraj, I think it will it will take a crane or something to take him away from the field. he is naturally blessed with fitness. He will want to continue.
The
So
stairs
let's
almost took him off the field, but no, he did go off for a short while.
yeah. He did. I think he had stepped on the ball or something had happened,
Or it
and
was Bumrah who
Bumrah on the
slipped
stairs, I
down the
think.
stairs. Yeah.
Bumrah had rolled his ankle on the stairs. Oh, Siraj had rolled his foot on the footholds, but he was fine.
So much for England's juju being over.
Yeah. So I think it should be, if let's say Bumrah's three tests is set in stone, then it should be Siraj, Akashdeep, and either Arshdeep or Prasidh Krishna as the third fast bowler. Fourth should be Kuldeep Yadav. And this is what we are saying what should be. Or if the pitch is green, which is highly unlikely, because yesterday, as the match finished, we saw the women's IPL final. Women's IPL. Sorry, I think it was either the 100 or the Blast. It was being played at the Oval. In 3 days, I don't think this pitch is going to become a test green seamer, or it's also not to England's benefit for it to be a green seamer. England would want a flat pitch where they can, I think, because given their injuries, they would want to play for a draw. So I think Kuldeep Yadav becomes a
England
must.
playing for a draw? I thought they don't do draws.
Didn't they offer a draw? And that was the irony. England, who hate a draw, are are offering a draw and are getting worked up for that offer not being accepted. Anyway, so it should be, yeah. If Siraj is also not there, then India have Akashdeep, Arshdeep, and Prasidh Krishna. Now, I don't think the pitch will have enough for four strike bowling seam bowlers. So then I think the fourth bowler should be Kuldeep Yadav. So I'm just starting from the bottom of the order. You have, if Bumrah and Siraj are available, it's Bumrah, Siraj, Akashdeep. If Bumrah is not available, it's Siraj, Akashdeep, Arshdeep / Prasidh Krishna. Now, then you have Kuldeep Yadav. Then you have Jadeja and Washington. These should be your six guys. You don't have to feel obligated to bowl all six of them. If you think Jadeja, you can also play Jadeja just as a pure batter. Then you have Jurel at 5, and the top 4 remain same.
I just on this question though of Prasidh versus Arshdeep, I know Bonga is conveniently putting a slash there. But to bring Arshdeep in, I know it's a very tempting option. He's a left-arm fast bowler, point of difference. We know he has the pace. At least in white ball cricket he has. I don't know about red ball cricket, about the consistency of that pace. But wouldn't that again, KK, be being, bringing in another guy ahead of Prasidh now, who has been at least part of the squad through the series, but who hasn't played a test yet, and in fact would be making his debut? Isn't that another case of, putting a guy in that hotspot when, Prasidh has at least played 2 tests in the series?
It would, and I'd feel bad for Prasidh Krishna. But I think Arshdeep was kind of going to play this test if he had not. And he was originally in the squad, and he has that left arm point of difference. So I can understand playing him, though it would still look bad. I mean, for all the reasons that we have mentioned. And also, I think Oval is one of those sort of bouncier English pitches generally, traditionally, which could theoretically, be the kind of pitch where you want to play a guy like Prasidh Krishna. But yeah, I mean, I would honestly be like, okay, Arshdeep is coming back from injury, Akashdeep is coming back from injury. I want India to be very sure that all of their fast bowlers, whoever they're looking at, are like bowling long spells in the nets, and then they're making their judgments on the basis of how threatening they're looking, how they're keeping their intensity up. And then whatever happens on the field, it happens, right? But yeah, the broad combination has to be 3 strike fast bowlers, 1 strike spinner in Kuldeep Yadav, and your 2 all-rounders in Jadeja and Washington.
Yeah, okay. Quickly, before our producer literally just, ends this call and forces us to stop, we haven't mentioned Rishabh Pant, obviously his courageousness in coming out to bat with that injured foot. Obviously, it's the end of his series. It's been an excellent series for him with the bat. What did you make of that particular moment where he decides on day two that I will come out despite a broken toe and get an extra 10, 15 runs if I can for my team? What did you think of it, sir?
To be honest, I felt it was not required because India
This is
were
why I
already
asked, because you're the only person who would say.
because India were already past 300, and at that moment it looked like India had enough because the ball was doing a lot. Little did we know that the pitch was going to go to sleep. Perhaps, who knows, Rishabh Pant maybe knew it, but Rishabh Pant just acted in the moment and he did what he would do 100 times out of 100. Just give his best and do what he can. And who am I to tell him what makes sense or not? Because he does things that
Yeah,
do
you're
not
not
make
Ben Stokes, so.
sense.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I just had mixed feelings about that last day, about the partnership that Jadeja and Washington were putting on, because I mean they were batting beautifully and it was great and all of that. But some part of me, was like, I would love to see how Rishabh Pant negotiates, this situation, because especially like Dawson bowling into the rough and all that, because he's not going to be able to run down the pitch and hit him for six like he did with Jack Leach in Chennai. So what's his response going to be? Like he's going to pretty much have to stand there and like
how sadistic.
just trust his eye and like do what was
I,
needed. It would
let,
have been fun to watch if he had found some kind of answer for any
Very
length of
sadistic.
time.
let me quickly
This
give
is very
people who want
sadistic.
to
You
say
want
something.
this guy who's broken his foot. You want him to go out just for your entertainment to see how he's
only
and
only
knowing Pant, he would have found a way. He would have just reversed every ball. I think
only
he could
because
have
of the
right-handed.
yeah, only because of the cricket fan in me and the knowledge that Rishabh Pant is a guy who will find a unique answer to those kind of situations.
Yeah.
But I think it speaks a lot of Pant, honestly. I'll give the more positive spin on this. That remember
Hey,
Rishabh Pant was a
what do you
guy who was
mean more positive? There was nothing negative said here.
okay. But Rishabh Pant is somebody who at one stage was considered for Test captaincy. He fell down that pecking order, and Shubman Gill was announced as the captain, him as the vice captain. I do think the way that he has, conducted himself through this series clearly shows that him and Gill have a strong partnership, and him doing that also, I think, was, in a way showing that listen, I'm going to do this for my captain Gill. Doesn't matter if I'm not the captain. He showed, to me at least, especially him being vice captain, I think that did show leadership. And we'll see how that inspires the team and all. We can't quantify these things, but I thought it was quite a nice moment to see him do that. I think KK brought up a nice point just so that we can sort of round it out, to go back to that last day, Washington and Jadeja batting together. I think one of the things, firstly, we didn't touch upon was the actual batting order where Washi came in ahead of Jadeja, which to me I think was quite smart, because they said they wanted to just keep Jadeja at six. They might also have been thinking there might be a very high pressure situation later where we need Jadeja, the more experienced batter. But also they didn't mess around with, let's do left right, which they did in the first innings. It kind of worked, I guess, with Shardul. But they have been very strange, in fact, how they batted Washi. They batted him at eight. Then they batted him above Nitish Reddy in the Lord's Test second innings, where it didn't make much sense. Here he came at five, Jadeja at six. But I think what KK said that was nice. That was after Jadeja and Washi, there was Pant on one leg, Shardul, and three bowlers. So even if the conditions eased up, I mean, they knew that one wicket, even in the after tea, and the game was open.
Yes, it was, but Shardul on that pitch would have been able to handle himself as he did in the first innings. Even Kuldeep, because that pitch was had become so slow.
Kuldeep
It
wasn't playing.
was.
Imaginary scenarios.
Sorry, KK, you wanted to say anything just to round us up on sort of that partnership, the Washi Jadeja partnership. I know you guys spoke
Yeah.
really well about Gill and Rahul and how they negated probably the toughest time in the innings. But Washi and Jadeja also, I mean, just strength of character also just shows the solidity of their technique.
They just have, they know their game. So Jadeja is just, he just has a lovely, like, minimalistic technique. He knows what his strengths are, and this was a kind of different innings from. I think Monga was. Did Monga bring it up, or did someone else? Where he was blocking, when India were chasing a win at Lords, and he's like playing his shots when India are, looking to draw this test. But that's somehow. I mean, sometimes that's how Test cricket works, because you get conditions which allow you to play your shots a bit more, and you want to transfer the pressure and keep a bowler away from a certain area or whatever, and you have to do what you need to do. And Jadeja has that kind of game as well, right?
Nothing of that sort. Jadeja is the most neutral batter I know. He has no preconceived notions about what he wants to do. He just goes out, purely reacts to what comes out of the bowler's hand and what the field is. Here he had the runs on offer. He took them. There he did not have runs on offer. He did not risk his wicket, which is also a sensible way of going about it. He's the most neutral, organic batter perhaps going around in the world, who just organically reacts to what comes out of the bowler's hand and what the field is.
I
These
think there was a
last few
little
gest-
bit. I
These
think
last
there's
few
just.
gestures from Monga, I think, explain why people are calling him the Osho of cricket analysis with the eyes closed.
I think there was like one point where he Dawson went round the wicket to him, and he kind of stepped out and hit him over the top a couple of times. I don't see that as purely a reaction to the bowling. I see a little bit of calculation involved there, but it could
Yeah,
be either.
that was getting
And
close to the
Washington,
mandatory hour, and he needed to get close to the 100.
So, but
no, but
I'll
also
finish
like
by
that was also the phase where every run is worth 2, right? So he's like, okay, let's.
Every minute is worth 2.
Yeah,
Anyway, I'll
and
finish up by saying, I think,
sorry, just one last, because you asked about Washington as well, right? And I think the promotion is also because you look at that lineup and you're like, okay, Pant isn't going to bat 5. Who bats at 5? I think it's a very natural reaction to be like, okay, Washington Sundar can bat at 5, so we'll send him in. It's just, I think sometimes it purely comes down to that. And maybe there's a little bit of thinking of, okay, this guy's going to bowl into that rough. Washington is a tall guy with a bit more reach, so let's, get him in first, get him to negotiate that period for now. So
I think the best example of Jadeja being a reactive batter was right at the end when Harry Brook was, I think, purposely bowling full tosses, and Jadeja didn't seem to know that. He's like, okay, full toss, whack it. There was no play acting by him of, oh, I'll block the full toss back. He's like, okay, full toss, 4, 4. Anyway, on that note, we'll wrap up this episode of Rock and Roll It. In the next one, we'll be rock and rolling the final test from the Oval. So stay tuned for that one.
TV umpire to director, we have a review. Can you rock and roll it for me, please?